name is Ella Kate Marisi, and you are listening to More Than Child's Play with your host, my mommy, Lacey Marisi, and my Aunt Nicole Surgeon. They are authors, therapists, and most importantly, mommies. And man, can they talk. So sit back and relax and learn from their village. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of More Than Child's Play podcast. This is Lacey, your host today, pediatric speech language pathologist, and I am overjoyed. I'm trying to use some different adjectives. I always say I'm excited, but I'm even more than excited today. So elated maybe is the right word. I am elated to be joined by Laura Brown. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lacey.
Oh, you're so welcome. We're so glad you had a little spare time in your schedule to join us today and share all of your wonderful knowledge about language development and little ones with our audience. So just to kind of introduce Laura a little bit more to you all, she is a pediatric speech language pathologist, and she's the mom of two adorable little boys. Laura's superpower is teaching babies and toddlers how to communicate. Yay! I like to think that's my superpower too, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Laura started her business, Mommy and Me Milestones, after the birth of her first son. And she started the business as a way to connect with other parents and professionals who share her passion for child development and early language skills. From that, her business has grown and grown, and it includes support to parents and professionals through her website, which is mommyandmemilestones.com, her Facebook page, and an Instagram account. She offers free resources on her website, as well as her just newly released course entitled 50 First Words. And that course is for parents and professionals alike. Laura also has an email newsletter that you can sign up through her website to receive updates and tips on language development and communication skills in young children. So Laura, like me, works in early intervention with little ones and their families, helping them to communicate. And kind of thinking about this upcoming conversation with Laura, you know, as EI speech language pathologists, we talk to families a lot about all that goes into learning to communicate, all the milestones that have to be met, all the skills that have to be learned before we actually hear those first words in little ones. And when you have a child that isn't language delayed, you don't necessarily get to appreciate all those little baby steps and celebrations along the way. So as nerdy language lovers, we enjoy, observing that in children. We look for it not only in language delayed children, but also typically developing children, to just celebrate all those steps and kind of, we know what to expect and we're looking for it and really appreciate the miracle that development is. But the information, and Nicole and I felt the same way as you, Laura. When we were developing our product years ago, we felt like this information about child development, not only in language, but all areas of development, isn't information that really should just be shared in detail with families that have children with delays, with only those families. It's information that every family needs to know about, so that they can be educated on what to expect as their child grows and develops, and then can advocate for their child if they feel that maybe something isn't developing as it should. But again, it's information that should be known so that it can be appreciated by all families, so that they can just, again, celebrate that miracle that their child is and appreciate all those little steps. I mean, I just get so excited talking about it. But
I 100% agree. And I think there's so much power in having the confidence and feeling like you know how to support your child. And it really does make these early years more fun, I think, when you feel like I know what I'm doing, or I know how to support the skill. And there's a lot of guesswork in early childhood, but taking some of that out, I think, is makes parents a little less stressed and more confident and comfortable with supporting their kids in the early years. And I totally agree that this information about early development should be out there for everyone to enjoy.
Absolutely. That education leads to empowerment, and then again can lead to advocacy should it be needed for your child.
Right,
So,
exactly.
Yes. Okay. So let's just go ahead and start our conversation. We have some good questions to ask Laura. We're going to talk a little bit about her course that she has to offer on her website. And then at the end, Laura will share with you how you can get in touch with her and follow her again on her social media accounts and also find her website. So Laura, before those first words, like I mentioned before, there's a lot that goes into development, a lot of little milestones, little steps that have to be taken for the child. So what are some of those skills that a child needs before developing those first words?
I think it's important to kind of lay the very beginning foundation, because we know that language starts with social engagement, and that kids learn language through socially contingent interactions, which means they learn language from a real person responding to them in real time. And that foundation of play, which I know you talk a lot about and advocate a lot for, is really the starting point for where language develops. Learning that going back and forth in play. Those are your child's first little conversations. They're learning the nature of communication. And when we kind of follow our child's lead and respond to the things they're interested in and respond to the things that they are doing in play, we are building that foundation for communication to develop. So I think that's really important to note that as the starting point. And that is why we as early childhood people talk so much about play and the importance of that, because that is kind of what needs to be there before all of these other kind of little skills can develop that are going to lead up to those first words. So some of the other ones that I talk a lot about are early communication skills like gestures and eye gaze, and using that nonverbal way of communicating with caregivers. And that really comes from your caregivers responding to you. And then those communication attempts, as we know, get more mature throughout the first year. So really modeling and encouraging those gestures with your child is a really important precursor to the spoken language component. Also, we know that kids need to develop their ability to imitate in order to be able to start speaking more words. So, and we know that babies as young as 6 months, 6 to 12 months, can start to imitate some simple actions and sounds and play. So building a strong foundation of those skills. And then finally, we know they have to understand the words before they're going to say them. So setting that really strong foundation of helping your child learn language, taking the time to talk with them about things that catch their interest, and spending time reading with them and singing with them. All of those are really important things to kind of get them set up for success with spoken language.
Yes, all of those are great skills. So when you talked about, the first thing you talked about was that contingent response, right? That's one of the first things. That social interaction is
right.
one of the foundational skills for learning to communicate. I can remember my youngest, when she started cooing, it's even with babies start cooing, right? We say something to the baby, we've locked eyes with them, we're face to face. We say something and then we hear that sweet little coo. And then we say something again and then they sweet little coo back.
Right.
That's
right.
A conversation, or the beginning.
And it is the most beautiful, amazing thing too.
Yes, it is. And I remember, again, I think it was my youngest, because that's, my most recent memories. Probably all of them did this at some point, but I just remember being like, oh my gosh, so precious. But something as simple, it seems so simple to us, when we have a baby and we're sleep deprived and we're just trying to keep everyone alive and dressed and fed. But that's the beginning of that communication development.
Exactly.
And then you also mentioned gestures, and gesture development is so important. And I think, broadly, when we say communication, people just think talking, like they just think communication is talking, because that's how most of us communicate. But little ones, as before those words come, I think we often miss the gestures that they use, those nonverbal attempts to communicate. I think
I mean,
some of
those
them,
are starting so early. I mean, a lot of kids between, 6 and 9 months, they're starting with reaching towards things that they want, pushing things away. That is all communication, and
yes,
acknowledging that, responding to it, and then building on that, modeling the words that go with those communicative acts, modeling more advanced gestures like pointing to get something. So yeah, it is fascinating, the kind of evolution of communication skills, and it starts really early, and I love the way those skills kind of evolve over time. I just think it's so fascinating.
yes, it is. And it happens really quickly. And those kiddos that are
Mhm.
typically developing, these skills come
Right.
quick and fast and
Right.
overlap. And before we
Oh
know it,
yeah.
they don't need those gestures anymore because they've got the words. But
Right.
it is
Right.
exciting to watch it unfold. And then the last thing I just wanted to comment on, you mentioned kids have to understand words before they're going to be able to say words. And I find um, parents are often surprised because I go in for the evaluation and they're like, oh, he understands everything we say to him.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we take a little closer look and I start asking some more specific questions about, does he follow directions? Does he
Mhm.
respond to the announcement of it's bath time? Or does he
Mhm.
respond to seeing you go to the bathroom and hear you turn on the water? So then
Mhm.
we start breaking it down, then they start realizing, oh, and naturally, we're not going to have a kid that is saying words before he understands what those words mean, because why would I say
Right.
ball if I have no idea what BALL ball represents, So
Right.
that's
Exactly.
a really important skill, foundational skill to expressive language that I feel sometimes gets overlooked because, again, I
Mhm.
think we just assume they understand us because they give us that good eye contact and look at us for a second.
Right. Right.
Oh, he's just stubborn. I hear that a lot too,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
oftentimes is they're just not understanding yet. So that one's
Yeah.
really a
And
really
there's something really obvious that parents are noticing, which is, okay, my child's not talking, or I'm not hearing words yet. But the kind of fun part of our job, I think, is like kind of going under the surface and saying, okay, what are those other skills that we get to build up in order to get there?
yes,
And
exactly.
that, I think we're both language nerds. I think it's fun.
Fun. Too funny. All right. Okay. So now we kind of know those foundational skills, those prerequisites that kiddos need before we're going to hear some of those first words develop. So,
Mhm.
Laura, what are some of your top tips that you share with families and parents of little ones for teaching those first words?
So we talked a little bit about modeling and encouraging gestures. So this is a really big one that I stress with the families I work on, because gestures are such an important part of our communication, even into adulthood. They give our children a way to communicate. They can help our children kind of repair if there's a communication breakdown. If they're trying to say something and we're not receiving that message or able to understand them, you could kind of fall back on their gestures. So there's a lot of benefit to kind of encouraging these skills. And one of the things that I suggest, which may seem obvious, but may not, is that you have to model a lot of gestures for your child to use them. And when we're talking about gestures, we are talking about things like reaching for something you want, which usually turns into a point eventually. So pointing to things that a child wants, things like shaking your head for no, reaching your hands up to be picked up, waving goodbye, clapping your hands, even some more kind of representational or like iconic gestures, maybe like putting your arms out, like, and pretending like you're flying around like an airplane. So if you think outside the box a little bit and think more about, okay, let's add more of let's act some of these words out. Let's add more of a physical representation. That has a huge benefit for your child's ability to learn language, for their ability to communicate with you. So that's a big one. And then I also love, and we talked about this a little, at teaching sign language, simple signs alongside some of these gestures to help kids communicate prior to being able to use a lot of spoken words. My son is 16 months and he has lots of words, but he is also still using all of his signs. And those two, kind of working on all of these things, working on spoken words, adding gestures, including signs, it is just going to give your child that many more opportunities to communicate and have a robust style of communication with you. So all of those things, that's kind of one tip, yes, all wrapped into one. Yes. And then additionally, we talked about the importance of receptive language and how important it is that your child understand words before they're going to be able to say them. And something I talk in my course about a lot is contingent input. And that kind of sounds complicated, but it's not. You are just going to follow your child's lead and talk about the things that catch their interest. You're going to notice the way that they are communicating with you nonverbally, and you're going to say words that match the words that you think they would be saying if they were using more words. And I love kind of stressing contingent input versus talking all day, or, that kind of advice to just like fill all of the silence with words. We know it's important that we talk a lot, but we also know it's important that our kids get quality input. And I think it really takes pressure off parents to talk. If you kind of lay that foundation of, let's just follow your child and go in behind that. So you don't have to feel like you are filling every moment of silence. You are just kind of keeping it really natural, talking about things that they're doing as they're doing them, and talking about things that catch their interest. And that way your child kind of gets to steer the ship when it comes to the way you're talking to them and the way you're talking with them.
Right. And two, I think taking that pressure off the parent to fill every second of silence with words then allows a little bit of space and pause for the child to respond, right?
Right, exactly.
If they're able, that gesture, that word, that sound, that whatever. So that's really important too.
And honestly, that's even more important. We talked about the socially contingent nature of community. That's the most important thing, that responding, that back and forth. You respond and then give them time to respond, and keeping that bouncing back and forth is the number one most important thing you could do to help your child grow their communication and get ready for talking.
Yes. And I want to back up just a little bit. So you just talked about just the importance of gestures. And then you kind of just mentioned how, all of us use gestures, not just little ones who are developing language. And as you were saying that, I sat here, I know you guys can't see it because we're a podcast, but I sat here at 43 years old and was nodding my head, giving Laura a gesture. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, I'm listening to you. So stop and think about that today, guys. Think about all the gestures you still use. And I often will say to parents too, teaching gestures, teaching signs, using pictures to support language. All of those things come in handy to supplement verbal language, because there's moments, even as adults, when we get frustrated and when the words don't come, right? So even though the kiddo has some words, it's nice to have those gestures to fall back on, or have those. Parents are always concerned when they send their little one off to preschool if they're language delayed, because, they have less language than their peers. They're with a new adult who doesn't know their way of communicating. So I'm always like, these gestures are going to support them in that context, in that environment to back up. Maybe if their verbal isn't understood, they still know that sign, or they still know that that way to express that, to supplement and clarify and kind of help that, that new person in their life understand. So yeah, gestures are for a lifetime, not just for toddlers.
Exactly. And we know they support and give your child a way to communicate, but they are also I know there's some people that have concerns, especially with, like, I hear this with introducing sign language a lot. Will this inhibit my child's verbal communication? Well, if they can sign, why will they want to talk? But I know you and I both know that using gestures, using signs, building up these communication skills. You mentioned pictures. That's another great one. Giving them those tools for communication, it also supports all of the skills that they need to grow to get ready to speak words.
Right.
So we know not only are these strategies great communication tools, but they're also getting kids more ready to say words. They're growing those foundational skills that they need. So it does not inhibit spoken language. It actually supports that spoken language development.
Right. And I hear that from parents a lot too. It's a very natural concern to have. You know, we want him to be a talker, not a signer,
Right.
you know,
Right.
So, and I often will say to them, you know, in my almost 17 years of working in early intervention, when I teach a little one, when a family, you know, teaches a little one signs, as soon as they say the word, the sign falls away. You know, they stop doing the sign because it's easier to say the word, right? Versus the motor movement. They still might fall back on that sign to supplement down the road. But you know, all the children that, you know, aren't hearing impaired and don't need to depend on sign language as their primary mode of communication, they eventually lose that, you know, replace that sign with the word.
Yeah. So, it's kind of, I usually let kids kind of guide that. And absolutely. I will tell parents there is no need to ever stop signing, or, you know, kind of end the use of that strategy, because kids will figure it out on their own if they start to say it and they aren't wanting to use the sign as much anymore. That's okay. One of the neat things about signing with my baby now is that my 4-year-old is really into learning signs again, and he signed as a baby. And he wants to know the sign for every word. So it's really up to every family. Keep signing, or if your child is, you know, taking off a spoken language and letting those drop off, that's okay too. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of go forward with that, but there's just so many benefits to using that strategy for our children who are still learning communication.
Absolutely. And signing is a second language, you know, I mean, if your kid is interested in it, your family's interested in it, keep learning it. I mean, it can only, you know, be an asset to your child, you know, as they grow up and one day enter the workforce and they have this extra skill set, right? That not everyone has. So, okay, we'll stop talking about signs. We could talk for hours about that too. All right. So, well-intentioned parents who love their children more than life sometimes do things that might not be the best for language development. Again, it's well-intentioned. We run into this with families all the time. I am guilty of doing some of these things, even though I have the knowledge I have as a speech language pathologist. So Laura, what are some of those common mistakes that we sometimes see with families when they're trying to teach their little ones to talk?
Okay, so there's a few. And before we start talking about these, I want to say that there's nothing inherently wrong or bad with the things we're going to talk about. There's just alternatives that we know better support language development. So if this is something you've done, or, you know, something you've used in the past, it's okay. We're all still learning. So
absolutely,
it's not bad. We're just going to talk about some alternatives that are better suited for supporting language and supporting our new talkers.
I think it's a quote from Oprah or Maya Angelou.
When
you know better, you do better, or something like that, right? So that's what we're here for, sharing good information so everyone will know better and they can do better. So
100%. So one of the things I talk about a lot is, and this is something that a lot of parents and professionals use when they are working with new or emerging talkers, and they will say, use your words. So there's a couple things about this that are not ideal when it comes to supporting language. Number one, you're putting a lot of pressure on a child to talk in that moment. And we know that kids learn best when they're engaged and motivated, and when that pressure to perform is low. Additionally, we're often saying this to kids who are still learning language. They're still learning how to talk. They're still learning how to use words to communicate. And they're relying on us to teach them, to show them, to model. So when we're saying use your words to a child who is still figuring out talking and using words, we're putting all of the responsibility on them when really it's our job to be teaching them and to be modeling that language for them. So instead of saying use your words to a child who, if usually this occurs in the context of a child is whining or using gestures to get something or to communicate something, and we would say use your words. So instead of that, you can try a little wait time. So you're going to pause and look at them and see maybe they can use their words. And in that moment, when you give them that look that says, can you say it? And wait, that's their chance to say them. And if they don't, then we're going to model the words for them. We're going to say what we think they would want to say. So we might say, I need my snack, or crackers, or I'm hungry. And then we're going to give them the item, or follow through on the communication in whatever way. So that's a big one for me.
I just
additionally, go on.
So I feel the same way about the use your words, well-intentioned, but it's typically we use it with kiddos who still need more practice hearing those words, imitating those words. But also you made a good point. Oftentimes we prompt kids to use their words in situations where they're probably their emotional state is a little bit heightened. And we all know it's a little harder to communicate effectively when we're a little worked up, right? So, they're fussing because they're hungry, and then we're prompting them to use their words. And even if they have those words, they might not be able to access them or retrieve them and speak them.
Exactly. That's such a good point. And I love the way you put that.
Yeah. So that's very, very good advice. Again, no harm done. Just know now that might not be the best strategy to help your child say words in the moment. They still might need your model, and that's okay. We can give that model till the cows come home and they eventually start saying it spontaneously, right? Giving the model is not going to hurt them or hinder them. They will say those words when developmentally they are able to say those words in that situation. So, okay.
Right. All right. Okay, so the next one is the next kind of common mistake that I see is parents doing a lot of quizzing or questioning, asking a lot of questions to kids who are just kind of learning how to say first words, or maybe aren't talking at all. So they might use a lot of like, what's this? What's that? Or what are you doing? And I encourage parents, when I work with families, to flip that script. So if you want to say, if you hold a book and you have a picture of a dog and you want to say, what's this? Instead, you're going to say, it's a dog. If you walk into the room and your child is playing with their ball, instead of saying, what are you doing? You're going to say, you're playing, it's a ball, roll the ball. So you're going to kind of flip that around. And we talked about the importance of language modeling. So in this way, your child is getting that valuable language modeled for them. They're getting that valuable input. And then again, it keeps the pressure to talk low, and it creates more engaging and motivating interactions, which we know is kind of the perfect recipe for language to bloom.
I love that tip. So if the parent feels like they want to ask the kid a question, just answer your own question. Don't ask the question.
Exactly. Well, and we've all seen the kids who, what's their first word? What this? What that? And why do you think that's what they're hearing? So if you have a what's this or what's that kid, think about how often you might be asking some of those questions and try to work on modeling some of the words for those things instead.
Yes. Good tip. Okay.
So finally, I'll talk about one last thing, which is choosing words to kind of model and teach to your child. And I see a lot of parents and just a lot of focus in general on more advanced concepts, more academic type of language that is not really necessary for very young children. So I'm thinking like children under the age of 3, I don't want to be talking about color words, the names of letters, shapes. Like I'm going to set all of that aside And instead, we're going to save that for later. Those are fun things to work on later, but let's give your child really words that are really powerful to communicate. So words for their favorite things, their favorite foods and toys, words like eat and go and all done and more and play, things that are really going to help them communicate and better navigate their day. Words for, their favorite people, their favorite activities like bath and out or outside. So focusing more on those words that are really meaningful for your child now, and then saving some of those other more kind of academic words for later. And this is really hard because of the toys that are just so ubiquitous. Every toy, even for babies, is all about colors, shapes, letters. So it is a practice, even for me, to step back from modeling those and think about, can we talk about, instead of naming the shapes as we do the little shape sorter, can we talk about pushing them in or taking them out or asking for more or doing it again? So it is a practice to do this because of the way that these toys are presented to us. And that's nobody's fault except for I guess the toy companies or whatever. Yes. But it's a challenge, but it's definitely important for your child to have more access to those powerful words that help them better communicate.
Absolutely. And I think, discussion about play could be a whole other podcast.
I
already talked to Emily Cohen once on a podcast about play, but I could talk for many more. But, I think as early intervention providers, educating families on just what you talked about, that, don't feel that pressure to teach letters, shapes, colors, numbers before the age of 3, especially when we have a language delayed kiddo who needs functional words, right? To have get their needs met, to participate in conversations, to build those social language skills, et cetera.
Exactly.
But it's the marketing, influence, they prey on parents' fears that their child isn't going to be smart if they don't teach them letters by 18 months or whatever it is.
Right.
And all of those, so many of those toys, I go to Target, I go to Walmart, I go anywhere, and the aisles are just filled with those battery operated, light up, singing ABCs and counting toys. But those toys, just like you said, we can take the batteries out, which is my favorite thing to do. Save the family money too. And even though it's a shape sorter that sings in English and Spanish and names colors and, shapes, names shapes and whatever, we can use that same toy and use our own voice to make it something more functional, to teach more functional language, to, encourage that language development that is age appropriate, developmentally appropriate. So not all is lost on those toys. We just have to know how to use them in a developmentally appropriate way for the child to encourage skill development versus the way that the toy company wants us to use them, which makes us feel like, oh my gosh, often causes families to panic,
and
because
they are not setting us up for success with this. It's hard. It's hard to kind of play with these toys and think about what to say other than those things.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because naturally you just name what's in front of you, right? So, but I talk to families a lot about naming actions, that's the prepositions, those are all early word targets. And like you mentioned too, just functional, what words are most functional for my little ones? What words can I model for him that hopefully he will imitate, that he can use in all different types of context,
Right.
I have a super sweet story I just want to insert here real quick. I had a little guy a few years ago. Oh my gosh. So I had this little guy a few years ago, and certainly we have kiddos that just love colors or just love numbers and letters. And so, that's okay too. If they're into that and they want to learn it, go ahead, but also teach them those functional words alongside. But he was really into all those kind of early academic vocabulary. And so he knew his colors real well. And he was, I don't know, probably like 2.5, and it was the winter time and it had snowed a lot. And he took his mom and dad took him outside and he said, white. He didn't have the word snow, but he knew the word white. And I was like, that's so awesome, because he took that color word, which I was like, this is not a functional word, but it's okay. It's a word, it's a good word. But he used it in a functional way to label the snow. So from that, we worked on white snow, like we got a teal
Right.
on. But, it just really, it was so sweet. And I'll never forget him and that huge, monumental occasion that he spontaneously commented on something and labeled the snow white.
Yes, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was super sweet. But yeah, functional vocabulary, early first words, just keeping in mind what words can they use to get their needs met, and use in multiple contexts are going to be the ones that we want to target, like you mentioned. So
exactly.
Okay. So we touched on sign language a little bit ago. We kind of jumped ahead a little bit, and our last question was going to be about sign language and if it does delay children from using spoken language, which we talked about that it doesn't. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that about the use of sign language or teaching little ones sign language?
I think we covered it for the most part. Really, the biggest things are to introduce signs, again, that are meaningful and help your child communicate. I actually have a resource on my website for introducing sign and introducing lots of high power communication words through sign. And some of the ones I recommend getting started with: eat, more, all done, help, adding some words like go, stop, out, bath, book, things that they are part of their daily routines. Signs for you can add signs for their favorite foods and favorite toys. I like to just do the sign for play as well. So that kind of gives you a few that you could start with, but definitely adding those in around, you can start as early as 6 months. Kids are usually more ready to start using them and imitating them around 9 months. And every child's a little different, but I really just love that communication tool for both parents who have concerns about their child's development, have kids that are in speech therapy, and also parents who have children who are not in speech therapy. I think it is a great tool for any child to kind of boost their communication skills and give them a way to better communicate with you before they're using a lot of words.
Absolutely. And if we happen to have any parents listening that maybe want to start some signing with their little one, keep in mind, I always tell families when we start with sign language or we start with pictures, this is a whole new way to communicate that we're introducing to your baby or toddler. So you're going to have to do a lot of modeling. Don't expect the imitation of the sign right away. Just like with language, we have to say the word ball many, 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 many times before we might hear that word come out of their little mouth back to us in imitation. So don't get discouraged. It takes a lot of modeling of you doing those signs within context of the daily routine or the activity or whatever. And don't be afraid to use sign language just to accompany your spoken language all day long. Like you just said, Laura, you sign the word play, probably when you see your boys on the floor playing, oh, you're playing. And I'm signing in case listeners don't know that. But, using that sign language just to kind of back up what you're saying is always a good idea. Often parents will say to me, I just want to work on one sign at a time because I don't want to confuse him. And so then I explain, you're not going to confuse him. Adding the gesture, the sign behind your words is just going to help him understand a little bit sooner what you're talking about. It's going to give him multiple modes of communication to imitate. If he's able to imitate the gesture or the word, we're giving him 2 ways to communicate back to us. So I try to encourage them to sign as much as they can because it won't hurt at all.
I'm so glad you said that and added that, because I do see a lot of people throwing in the towel on sign way too early. They'll try it for a couple of weeks, and then when they're not seeing any signs emerging, they're ready to be done with it. And you're so right that kids need to see these signs modeled so much before they're going to be able to use them. But I mean, I can't speak enough as a parent about how valuable this has been communicating with my own children.
Yes.
And I've used it obviously with hundreds of families in therapy as well. But speaking as a parent and really sticking with the signs, it paid off so much in just terms of our ability to communicate more effectively with our very young babies and toddler.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to, two other things while I still have you. So a super exciting thing to observe as an SLP, and I'm sure you've observed it too with little ones. They sometimes come up with their own signs, they make up a new gesture, right? Like, oh my gosh, I get so excited about that because that tells me not only are they doing a few signs and learning to use signs to communicate with us, but now they know that their gestures have communicative power, and they figure out a way to make up a new sign to represent something important in the world, to communicate it to us, that problem solving, that cognitive, just, like development, that receptive language development. It's like so exciting when little ones, create their own sign language.
I know my baby has one. He puts his hand up on his face and like snuggles his hand when he thinks something is cute. So like that's his like, oh,
that's sweet. Super sweet. I love that too. Oh yeah, that's just really again, another exciting time as an SLP to observe that in little ones and with their families. Other thing I want to touch on about sign language. So it's kind of, a hot topic in the SLP world. Do we teach the sign for more? Do we not? I have an opinion, but I want to hear what your opinion is about that.
Oh gosh, I'm so curious what side you're on, Lacey. I am outspokenly pro teaching more. And I think as you and I probably agree on this for the same reason, which is this is about teaching the power of communication. So if you start with more, and first of all, they can use it to request lots of different things in many different ways across a variety of activities, which is great. And if they pick up on more and they're using it and they're overusing it, that is amazing. They understand that word has a lot of power. And then we go from there and we refine it. And we teach, the more specific vocabulary and teach them to be more discriminative in their use. But I understand the kind of other side about more being overused, but I think that's our kind of opportunity to teach a really powerful sign, let children start to understand the power their communication has, and then refine from there. You can always teach more, help them discriminate. So I personally love teaching more.
I agree with you 100%. That's why we like each other so much, Laura.
Yes.
But I agree. And I believe maybe Laura Mize said this once, just don't get stuck at more. You know what I mean? Like teach more. They learn they have communicative power, like you just said, with that sign. So it validates them, and then also inspires them to learn more signs to communicate. But just don't get stuck there. When I have little ones that start imitating more, then we start adding more drink, more eat, more play, more whatever. Right. So you just add to it. You just don't stop there. And the same thing with please. As SLPs, manner words aren't the first ones that we want to teach because they're not super functional. They're abstract, words, but parents, they want their kids to be mannerly, which I certainly can respect. I also felt the same way and continue to teach my children manners at their older ages. But again, if the little one picks up on please as a requesting word, that's fine. Add the next sign to it, eat please, or help please, or mama please. So you just, you start.
I also am very pro please. And one of the reasons is it's one of the easiest signs motorically for kids to pick up on. And I feel from my perspective, and everyone has a different perspective on this, that please is very clear in terms of request. If someone walks up to you, even as an adult, and says, please, they want something. You might not know what they want. And like we said, we refine from there. We teach specific vocabulary for foods or toys or games from there. But I'm pro more, I'm pro please. And it's because they're easy signs to start with. They're signs that kids tend to pick up on really quickly, and they're powerful, and they're a great starting point for kind of growing communication beyond there.
Yes, absolutely. And I was trying to locate, I listened to Shar Boshart has a podcast, The Speech Link. And I listened to an episode of hers recently, and now I can't find it, of course, to reference, but it was an SLP that works in EI. And she talked all about teaching sign to little ones and their families. And she always has the family model 2 signs at a time, because it supports, more robust language. And then again, it gives the child the option of which sign they motorically are able to imitate. So going back to how please, if for any of you listening that don't know, please is just your whole hand against your chest and rubbing your chest kind of in like a circle motion. So it is easy, because really little ones, when they imitate it, they just kind of hit their chest, and that's usually what we get first, but eventually they get that rubbing motion on their chest in that circle. So it is motorically easy, but even still, if we say eat please, and eat is a little bit harder for them to imitate motorically, then they can at least imitate that sign for please. But again, if I can find that, I will I'll send it to you, Laura, and I'll include it in the show notes for everyone else. But it was really interesting to hear her why she believes in modeling always 2 signs together at least, to support that more robust language development. But anyway, okay. All right. We're going to get off our sign language soapbox and wrap this up. Okay. So Laura, everyone in our audience, I'm sure, is very excited to check out your resources, check out your website again, mommyandmemilestones.com, and is spelled out. And then again, on Instagram, what's your handle on Instagram?
It's at Mommy and Me Milestones, and is also spelled out for that one too.
Perfect. And then Facebook, just search Mommy and Me Milestones, and I'm sure she'll pop up. So
correct.
All those places. And let's just touch quickly. So Laura allowed me to take a look at that new course that she has out, 50 First Words. And I just want to I can't compliment it enough, to be honest. I talked in a podcast a couple months ago with Stacy Landberg about adult learning principles, because when we work in EI, we're working with the adults really more so than the child themselves, right? Because we're teaching the parent through parent coaching. And Stacy talked a lot about when we're working with adults, she gave tips on those adult learning principles, but keeping it simple was one of them. Learning within context was one of them. And I just want to say, as I was watching your course and going through the supplemental materials that you offer, watching the videos of you with your little ones, not acting out, but doing these strategies in real time with your little kiddos, that's within context, right? That's the perfect example. We can talk about a strategy till we're blue in the face, but until a parent sees it in action and within context, it doesn't always make sense. So the video examples you offer in your course, the information you present in very organized, simple language that, no professional jargon was used. But on the flip side of that, I think your course is also very valuable to professionals. I loved how, again, she offers so many free downloads that highlight, the important points for each chapter, part of the course. Then the other thing I love that you did was I'm about halfway through, but each little chapter, I think the longest one is 8 minutes. You know what I mean? Like you kept it in these small, and what came to my mind, my kids are older, so I'm able to sit down and watch a 2-hour course for the most part without much interruption. For parents of little ones, that's not doable, but you had a 3-minute little chapter, a 5-minute. And again, the most was 8 minutes. I thought, wow, this is wonderful. Even before they close their sleep deprived eyes at night, they could watch 3 minutes of this course and learn something new for the next day. So again, I encourage everyone to check it out. It's so well done. You present the research, what you recommend for language development, which I love that as a professional. And I know parents will appreciate that too, to know why what they're doing will matter or make a difference for their child. So you present that research. It's so well organized. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and well worth the investment from a professional, because you also can get continuing education credits from watching it, as well as the investment for a family, to put into purchasing your course. So anything you want to add?
Lacey, that is such a nice compliment. You totally made my day, and I really appreciate the kind words. I'm very excited about the course. I've gotten great feedback so far, and I really hope people love it and get a lot out of it.
Yes. Awesome. And then the last thing I forgot, because I made myself notes and I missed this one. She has a section on frequently asked questions about first words. I love that, right? Because there are questions we get as early intervention therapists, a lot of the same typical common questions, concerns. So I love that you put that in there, and I watched it and I was like, yep, I've heard that question. Yep, I've heard that question. So it was like, you're learning and you're getting all your questions answered, and you're coming out with these free resources and downloadable materials to take with you to remember after you listen to the course. Again, please check it out. And I will include the link to your website, your social media accounts in our show notes for everyone interested in reaching out to you. And then, Laura, do you have an email if they just want to email you directly with a question that they have?
Yeah, sure. You can send me a message on social media, or you can email me, laura@mommyandmemilestones.com. I love hearing from people. I love getting emails. I love answering questions. I'm just that way. I think it's fun. Also, I want to let people know that the course has a guided learning component. So we're going to be covering a module per week together, starting here soon. But that does mean that enrollment closes here at the end of the week, and we're talking in October. So if you're listening to this later in the fall or early winter, the course is going to reopen for enrollment every 3 or 4 months. So just know that if you are looking for more information about the course, the next time I'm going to open it for our next guided learning session will be in January. So, and you can always reach out to me and ask specifically if you have questions about that.
Okay, awesome. So just explain a little bit more the guided learning, like you'll meet on a regular basis, or how does that work?
So we're going to do, it's an exclusive Facebook group for course participants, and we're going to cover one module per week. There's 6 modules of the course. For each module, we're going to have top takeaways. We're going to talk about those. We're going to answer any questions about the content of that module. We're going to have a bonus lesson and a case study for each one. So we're going to be talking a lot. I'm going like totally overboard, because that's like the part I'm most excited for, is connecting with people in this group and actually having the conversation. So that's the part that I'm most excited for.
Well, now I'm most excited about that, because you guys, not only are you getting all those wonderful things that I already mentioned, but now you're going to get to talk directly with a speech language pathologist herself and ask her questions. And, I mean, it's for professionals, but also again, for families alike, like that connection with somebody who works in the field, who can help guide you. If you have concerns, then I'm sure you'll reference people to, seek out help or evaluation.
Of
if you
course,
feel like
yes.
It's more than just something that can be helped through, just a few changes at home. But that is awesome. I mean, awesome. I'm so excited for you, and so excited that this resource is out there for everyone to take advantage of. So gosh, talk about investment value. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. Okay. All right. We better wrap things up here. But Laura, thank you so much for joining me today, and for this rich conversation about communication, for getting me all pumped. I'm excited about working in this field again.
I know. I could tell we are cut from the same cloth, because I know we could talk about this all day, but thank you so much for having me. And it was great talking with you today.
Thank you for listening to another episode of More Than Child's Play podcast. If you wouldn't mind taking the time to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podbean, Nicole and I would really appreciate it. Also, if you have any suggestions for guests or topics that we could discuss on the podcast for our next episode, we'd love to hear from you.